Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is Abushmالة speaking for Translation 1 course. And this is the first lesson of our course, and we are going to talk about what is translation or the definition of translation, translation types, translation methods, and translation strategies. If we start by the question, what is translation? Actually, there are many different definitions by many different scientists about what is translation. Translation could be defined as the process of turning from one language into another, or the rendering of something in another medium or form. We have Naida and Tabor who define translation as reproducing the receptor language, the closest natural equivalence or equivalent of the source language message, first in terms of meanings and in terms of style. An example of this definition is when we translate the word or the utterance Assalamu alaikum to English into hello, which makes the translation maybe more natural for a non-Muslim who doesn't know about or doesn't know what does Assalamu alaikum mean. Okay, so let's go to another definition by Catford, who says that translation is the replacement of textual material in one language by equivalent textual material in another language. Steiner defines it as the interpretation of verbal signs in one language by means of verbal signs in another language. Verbal signs means verbal, which means voice or the sounds, or printed, either the spoken or printed text or let's say language. Okay, we have Vermeer, who defines it or who says that translating is to produce a text in the target setting for a target purpose and a target addressee in the target circumstances. So here in this definition, it focuses on the target purpose. Venetti defines it as a process by which the chain of signifiers that constitutes the source language text is replaced by a chain of signifiers in the target language, which the translator provides on the strength of an interpretation. Gideon Turi said that it's a kind of activity which inevitably involves at least two languages and two cultural traditions. This is a very important definition because translation and culture are, let's say, two coins or two faces for the same coin. Any translator have to be culturally aware of the languages they are dealing with, since culture affects translation. Culture affects translation. Let me give you an example here how culture affects a translation. In Arabic, when you, for example, tell me some happy news, the first thing that I might say to you is لقد أثلجت صدري. أثلجت صدري, where الثلج that we rarely see here in our countries and in the Arab countries is connected with positive things, مربوط بالأشياء الإيجابية. Now let's translate لقد أثلجت صدري into what? Into English. In English or in most of the Arab countries, like the weather most of the time is either rainy or snowy. So here not all the time winter or snow is connected with positive things. So when we translate لقد أثلجت صدري, the best translation here is to say you warmed up my heart. You warmed up my heart. Warm, in English is connected with positive connotations, and here why we say that culture is very, very important to be considered in translation. ترجمة which in English means to explain, and ترجمان is a person who transfers speech from one language into another. Usually I say in my classes that be careful that each language, when you translate, has its own style. Your style is different from your friend's style, and your friend's style is different from, let's say, the other one's style. English, let's see this example. In English, she was saddened by his departure. Usually, English prefers the passive style, while Arabic prefers the active style. So, when I translate this sentence, she was saddened by his departure, the best translation is أحزنها رحيله or لقد أحزنها رحيله. Let's look at this sentence. الزكاة ركن من أركان الإسلام الخمسة. And الزكاة here is a cultural term for Islamic culture that is not found in the target culture or target community. Here, one of the translation is zakat, using borrowing strategy to transfer the term as it is. Zakat is a pillar of Islam. English does not provide a cultural equivalent for the Islamic terms such as zakah, which is often borrowed into English. Another strategy, which is a description or definition, paraphrase, whatever, for the word can account for the meaning. For example, we can say compulsory charity in Islam when income conditions are met. By the way, you can use the two strategies. You can use zakat, and between the brackets you can use the description, or just the description can be used in the translation. Now let's look about the types of translation. We have Jakobson categories who provides 3 types of translation. The first one is interlingual translation, which is the translation between 2 languages, as we have mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. We usually deal with source language, and we will abbreviate it as SL, and target language using the abbreviation TL. So you are going to usually to see these 2 abbreviations, SL for source language and TL for target language. We have another type, which is interlingual translation or rewording and intersemitic translation. What is interlingual translation? Interlingual translation is exercises we engage ourselves in within the same language, such as paraphrase, explanation, or interpretation. For example, when I say عاد خالي الوفاض, when I do intralingual translation بمعنى ترجمة في نفس اللغة أو توضيح إعادة صياغة. So I may say عاد بخفي حنين. So interlingual translation within the same language, from Arabic to Arabic, from English to English, from French to French. We have the last type, intersemitic translation, which is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of signs of non-verbal signs system. It occurs when a written text, for example, is turned into film. Acting one of Shakespeare's plays can be one example of this type of translation. An example from Arabic is turning 1001 Night, ألف ليلة وليلة into a TV show. Okay, now in this book we are going to know about translation methods, and I want to tell you that in other translation books you may find other methods or other, let's say, techniques, but these are the ones which we are going to study in this book. So the main translation methods we are going to study are literal translation, semantic and communicative translation, adaptation, free translation, idiomatic, and metaphorical translation. Now let's say that these are the umbrella. Under these methods we have something called strategies, الاستراتيجيات. In each one of these methods we may use, let's say, subcategories which are called translation strategies. They are translation by addition, or could be translation by addition, translation by deletion, translating using a more general word, paraphrase, two techniques. I'm going to talk more about them in details in the next lesson, inshallah. So these are just the topics. Okay, now let's start with the first method, which is literal translation. What is literal translation? Literal translation is called also word-for-word translation. Translators basically translate one word at a time and follow the source text word order. This translation leads to many problems. One of the first problem is loss of collocational meanings, or it should be like, okay. This is the first problem, which is there's no respect for the target language, grammar, or idiomatic expression. For example, let's see these examples. Sami is a student. If I translate it literally, it will be طالب يكون سامي. Or the second example, he is a chicken. دجاجة يكون هو. However, the translations should be سامي طالب. And let's say, the connotations of the word chicken is not the direct meaning, which is دجاجة. What is intended when I say he's a chicken, it's like إنه جبان. إنه جبان. Problem number 2 that are results from literal translation is loss of collocational meanings. And collocation here that are can be defined as words that are tend to come together. For example, let's see the example here. Hand a friend a letter. رسالة صديق يد. Or the court passed a new law. قانون جديد مرت المحكمة. However, the best translations should be يسلم صديقا رسالة, where hand here doesn't literally mean the physical part of our body, which is hand. No, it means يسلم. Or سنت المحكمة قانونا جديدا, where pass doesn't mean مر أو يمر. Okay, problem number 3, loss of collocational meanings. If we have this example here, sitting duck, which is literally translated as بطة جالسة. But this is not what is intended from this translation. The idiomatic meaning is completely lost when the actual meaning of this idiom cannot be derived from the meanings of the individual words. Sitting duck refers to a person, or it means that someone, or sorry, a person or a thing which is not protected against attacks. In Arabic we can say it's هدف سهل. سهل يعني حدا يستهدفه يعني إذا كان في هجوم أو صراع بين طرفين أو شجار مثلا. Okay, beat, let's go to the second example. Beat around the bush. Literally it's translated to شجيرة حول اضرب. But beat around the bush means that someone is discussing a matter without coming to the main point. So in Arabic we can say يراوغ. يراوغ. Okay, now let's go to the important question. Is literal translation usually a bad choice? No. كوننا إحنا شفنا سلبيات ترجمة literal translation. Can we say that it's all the time a bad choice? Okay, the answer is that certain source language textual materials can be literally and accurately also translated between English and Arabic. For example, we have the let's say these examples: heavy industries, صناعات ثقيلة; blacklist, قائمة سوداء; an eye for an eye, العين بالعين. These are, let's say, literally, they are literally translated, however, they convey accurately the meaning. So the important thing here is that we cannot generalize the, let's say, that literal translation is all the time a bad choice. I have other examples. I'm gonna, let's say, attach it in this presentation that I'm gonna upload it to the model. Okay. Now let's go to another constraints on literal translation. First, the meaning differs according to its register. If we start or focus on the word register, what does register mean? Before going to this explanation, let's define register. Register means or refers to specific lexical and grammatical choices as made by the speakers depending on the situational context. Depending on the situational context, the participants of a conversation and the function of the language in the discourse. طيب, let's go back. Constraints of literal translation. First, the meaning differs according to its register. المعنى يختلف بحسب ممكن نحكي نوع النص أو سياق النص الذي نتعامل به. على سبيل المثال, let's look at these 3 examples and all of them like have the word depression. But depression's translation differs in every sentence because the register in every sentence is different. First, when I say he feels a great depression, هنا depression means اكتئاب, يعني in its general meaning يشعر باكتئاب شديد. 2, there is a depression moving in from the Atlantic. There is a depression moving in from the Atlantic. Here, depression means منخفض جوي. هناك منخفض جوي قادم من المحيط الأطلنطي. The last one is the depression affected the economic. The depression affected the economic, and here means the depression means الكساد الاقتصادي. So in sentence number 2 we are talking about what? About a genre that is related to, let's say, to broadcasting. Okay, in the third sentence the genre is economic genre, and the first one it's a very general word. So in each genre the translation differs. You have to be careful about this point. The second constraint is a wider semantic range compared to the corresponding target language word. For example, or what is meant by semantic range? It refers to the varying use of the same word. For example, we have the word bank here. Bank could mean financial institution, البنك اللي الناس بتقبض منه, or side of the river, حافة النهر, or bank on بمعنى يعتمد على, or bank of fog بمعنى كتلة من الضباب. So this is the end of our presentation for today. Thank you for watching.